not so sciencey today, more about policy. But I found this story to be interesting, and it was published on Wednesday. And then since then, there's been 3 related stories published to this, so it's gotten more interesting since Wednesday. So the title of the article is Marijuana Recall Due to Compliant Testing in Missouri. The Missouri Division of Cannabis Regulation, or DCR, working with Nature's Grace and Wellness, has announced a recall of marijuana products sold by NGWMO LLC. The recall affects products distributed to 80 dispensaries across the state following the discovery of non-compliant testing practices. The DCR, in cooperation with NGWMO LLC, issued a marijuana product recall today for marijuana products sold to dispensary facilities by Comprehensive Cultivation License NGWMO LLC CUL 00069 pursuant to 19 CSR 100-1.100 parentheses 4P. The DCR may issue public notice recall where marijuana products present a potential threat to health and human safety. No adverse reactions for these products have been reported to the DCR at this time, the release reads. The recall was initiated because the affected products were tested only at the unprocessed bud/flower stage rather than at the final product stage. DCR elaborated on the difference in the hold and recall list, explaining the recall that was issued earlier this week is related to a subset of these products placed on admin hold recently. However, there are some products listed on the recall that are not on admin hold. This is because there are products that were sold that were no longer in inventory. Patients and consumers need to know about those products, but there's nothing to hold those licensees accountable because they no longer have those products. The licensees have received a communication on this point. So this article goes on. There's nothing really special about this recall. There was no molds. There was no heavy metals. All they're saying is that there were like pre-rolls and other products that made it to dispensary. Even though the bud and the flower was tested, they've basically recalled all these products. 76,000 of them were recalled. Okay, so I thought that this was odd because it seems like, again, you know, the DCR here is supposed to be basically facilitating these businesses and getting stuff launched. And I guess, yeah, so the flower was tested, but the pre-rolls were not tested. So what's going to happen between flowers and pre-rolls? Well, I guess there could be microbial contamination, or it could degrade. Maybe the THC that, you know, was tested when it was first grown, it's put on the shelf. But what I notice is that if I go and I read the next article in this link, it talks about how big the Missouri sales are, and I guess the Missouri sales are, again, topping in over $100 million now. But then the next 2 articles in this link basically are the same thing, where they're just recalling material, recalling several $1,000s worth of product because it's just not fully compliant in their testing protocols. And so it's not like they found anything wrong with these products. So Missouri marijuana regulators issue recall for products tied to CNC manufacturing. This came out a day later. And again, more products are being recalled. The only notion is that the marijuana products were not compliantly tracked in the statewide track and trace system. So now there's 2 more recalls that have been announced in the same week of basically thousands of dollars of product just because it's not being conveniently traced. Well, again, this is what happens when these operators are basically working hand in hand with the hemp industry. So basically what's happening is all of a sudden in their tracking system, a bunch of product shows up. There's no seed to sale tracking on it, right? They don't know where those plants came from. Mm-hmm. All of a sudden materializes 10 kilograms of THC, which then go into vape pens, go into gummies, and go into all these formulated products. Well, it's obvious what's happening here, right? You could produce THC and psychoactive stuff from hemp for a whole lot cheaper than you can from growing cannabis and extracting it and putting it into products. So I think this is basically 3 different cases where there's been 3 recalls in 1 week by this Missouri's Division of Cannabis Regulation, because basically what they're finding is that their operators are putting hemp-derived stuff into the supply chain, and that makes a whole bubble in the whole seed-to-sale tracking thing. So at first, when I posted this story on Wednesday, I was like, oh, this is kind of a boring story. Okay, they're recalling some weed. And down in the announcement itself, there's this whole preamble about, if there is anybody who's affected by these products, and it's like, look, these products the weed was already tested. Now you're basically going to assume that the pre-rolls that are derived from tested weed are going to somehow get people sick? Are you kidding me? I think what's happening in the pre-roll thing, and Jason, you'll agree to this, they're just diluting that shit. You could basically turn 10 pounds into 150 pounds by just adding some hemp. Yeah. Add hemp, stir, and you have mids.
You know what we call that? You know what we call that, Dr. Mark? We call that cutter bud.
Yeah. So there's 2 kind of places in the seed to sale production process where there's slop, and where there's slop. Again, these unswarthy players can basically insert new input that's derived from cheaper hemp-derived sources. So one place where you can introduce slop, so when you're growing your plants, right, and now you have adult mature plants, when you trim those plants, you segregate those from your trim, your sticks and your stems, and you're taking your buds away and you take your trim away. Well, there's a lot of place for squish around there, right? So all of a sudden, what was 5 pounds could all of a sudden just become 15 pounds, right? And you could sort of like massage the data to basically say, okay, we had this much stuff coming through. The other place, and there's a few places in manufacturing and distillation, is that when you, if you do an ethanol-based extraction, most ethanol-based extraction extracts fats, waxes, and lipids, even if you do it down at minus 40 C. You can't help it. So there's usually a waste fraction when you winterize extracted oil. And when you winterize extracted oil, who's to say that you're getting 10 pounds of wax from that batch or 1 pound of wax from that batch, right? You basically call it. Now, some marijuana regulatory authorities in different states will actually want to see what is being thrown away, what's being discarded. But like one of my grower friends was telling me that he just takes all of his trim and all of his fan leaves and non-productive sticks and stems, and he just puts that back into his garden as mulch. So he just mulches it. He's been doing it for years, and the state wants him to weigh that because they need to be able to track how much marijuana is being produced in the system. Well, again, there's a little bit of slop there, so there's ways of introducing new inputs into the system. So I guess these folks in Missouri weren't really too smart, and were just thinking, well, we could just all of a sudden just create a bunch of vape pens, and just create a whole bunch of SKUs where you don't have the full, seed to sale tracking traced in your state's regulatory software that they're using. So this points out two things. First of all, these guys weren't too smart, right? But there's a lot of not too smart players that are out there. But secondly, there are smart players who are keen on how to basically massage the numbers and get more productivity in a seed-to-sale tracking thing. This is all just a stupid artifact of prohibition. If they didn't prohibit the plant, and if hemp and cannabis were able to come together and just be one unique industry and one unique plant, I think a lot of this shit would go away. But there in the Midwest, there's a lot of hemp being grown, and it's difficult to compete just on a price wise, and distribution, because those hemp guys, it's a much larger addressable market because they can cross state borders and use the internet, where regulated sales under regulated cannabis programs have to be seed to sale tracked. You need to do background checks on all your people. You need to have armored cars deliver things, and it's just way over-regulated. And this is just an example of how the seed to sale tracking thing is just going to basically be irrelevant in years to come because of these kinds of issues. So that's my story today. It turned out to be a more important story than I thought. When I first looked at it, I'm just like, oh yeah, some non-compliant weed, okay, big deal. But it seems like Missouri's got it out for this, and they're following their tracking software and making sure that no extra product makes it into their supply chain. Good in certain ways and bad in other ways, but I'd be interested in what my correspondents have to say. Back in Vermont, folks, so it's great to be home. Be interested in what y'all have to say. Have a great weekend this weekend, folks.
Man, I guess this has all started because of that distillate, right? They found all of that converted distillate from that one company, and made it into the system. They had a whole big recall, and I bet you this is all just stemming from all of that.
Stemming.
There were stems in the distillate?
Yeah, stems.
Oh,
no
boy.
sticks, no seeds.
No, but Jason, what they're doing too is they're using distillate to bring up THC numbers, and so you could do that on mediocre mids, right?
Yep.
So now what was like a 10 or 15% shake is now analyzing up into 20s or 30s. They're not only doing that with THC distillate, they're actually now doing it with THCA, and that becomes really difficult to determine whether the THCA was added to the low quality cannabis, or was it part of the THCA that was actually grown in the cannabis. Because with THC distillate, it's all decarboxylated, so as soon as you see high levels of THC, you have to wonder, well, why isn't that THCA? It's THC because they basically sprayed distillate onto it.
So, Mark, I got a question. For you. I'm curious about your opinion on that portion of the article that you covered that said that the recall that was issued earlier this week is blah, blah, blah. This is because these are products that were sold that are no longer in inventory. So how do you have a recall on things that have already sold through to the consumer, and how does that work in a regulated supply chain?
They do that in the car industry all the time.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess they want people to like check this story and to know that part of their cannabis, it's not like it's bad. It wasn't fully so the cannabis flower was tested, but then maybe they sold it to a manufacturer, put it in a joint machine, pre-rolled it, maybe rolled it in some keef, and now there's some keef cones that are being sold without a COA on the keef cone, but there's a COA on the flower. So I don't know. Maybe what they were relying on is those people who actually put those SKUs into the stores to basically say, okay, we need to pull that. But you're absolutely right. This is kind of like too little, too late.
I mean, if I go to a restaurant and I eat the fish, and 2 days later they call me and they tell me, that wasn't refrigerated well enough. I appreciate their attempts to keep us safe.
Yep.
I guess you're welcome. You're welcome to come back and barf into their salad bar. I guess.
Maybe this is just as a Missouri's version of a recent LA Times article that came out.
I mean, I think it's no secret that adulterated products are making their way into the market. I think this is, a shame on the bad operators that are doing it, because it's not a surprise. You're asking for conversion leaders. I've seen people fucking do it. Like, I've had people ask me for dirties. I'm like, I don't sell dirties, but God bless you. I think that.
I like
hold on, Yarrow,
adult.
let me finish.
Yeah.
Yarrow ate his Wheaties this morning. He's all hyped up.
Go ahead, Yarrow. And then we're gonna keep this moving.
You gonna let me? You gonna cut me off?
Oh, sorry. No, I wasn't trying to. I thought you were finished.
I think we're talking about a lot of failed DCRs because they should be doing a better job of getting these recalls out more quickly, but they all should be doing a better job of actually penalizing these people. And in California, the DCC's procedure, when you have some product that even if you can't find the proper origin for that tag, right? They're saying that it's a possibility that this could have been an adulterated product because you don't have the origin chain of command to say exactly where this came from, and that product is put under embargo immediately until you prove where the heck you got it from. So I think that the DCR in Missouri needs to take some notes for the DCC because it's a pain in the ass process. It's difficult, but it definitely will deter you from bringing in things that shouldn't be in the market. And I think when we're talking about consumer safety, that's when my hat kind of shifts off of, well, get your bread and do the right thing.
Buyer beware.
I was just gonna say I like adult rated, not adulterated.
Oh, I like what you did there. I like
Yarrow,
Yarrow, did you eat a blue chew this morning?
No.
On that, we're gonna go to our last commercial, and we're gonna be right back.
Yarrow, spicy.
I think there's an app for that.